And two things that I wanted to cover quickly before we wrap up is language. Like that, I was just thinking about one of the conversations she and I had about the word victim, or
Mm-hmm.
about the I am. And it was funny because she and I talked about an interview we did years ago where I was coming from a place of um, being an advocate, being someone who spoke for folks who had experienced sexual assault and violence.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, we talked about, are people ready, to just move past things? We were having this conversation, and she and I were just in slightly different places where I spent quite a bit of time just talking about, appreciating where people are and maybe they're not ready, right? So we kind of touched on that in the beginning, but we kind of wrapped around to the fact that the word victim, or I don't know, I am a failure. I am, the words that we connect I am to seem
Mm-hmm.
also to have a lot of power. And for me, I've worked really hard on reframing a lot of stuff, on even letting go of something like the word victim, and not only replacing with survivor, honestly, because I know that's something that we do, and that's fine, but also just seeing beyond um, either one of those words to say I've experienced this thing,
Mm-hmm.
and or I've experienced sexual assault, and adding to that, but that is not who I am. That is something that is part of my experience. And so I wonder what you think of the importance of language, and that type of piece of the conversation, what you thought of that.
Mm-hmm. I definitely loved the conversation that you two were having around like just honoring where people are. And I think that that's the my favorite definition of compassion is honoring where people are while seeing them as their like seeing their true power regardless of their circumstances. So like not invalidating the circumstance, like Dr. Chan was saying, is like, I'm not saying something awful didn't happen to you, but I don't see you as a victim. So it's like not invalidating circumstances, but seeing the person, and regardless of what they, and I think that that's our power as folks who have moved through the feeling victimized, feeling angry, which is more powerful than feeling victimized, and to actually finding space where it's like, oh, I have those experiences and I can actually see how those experiences have contributed to who I am today. The compassion that they give me for other people, like you were talking about with your like with the seizures that you used to have. So these different experiences, they're all part of who we are today. And as we have looked at our own journey, done the reframing, accepted the guidance of like people who, because your teacher saw you as powerful, or he wouldn't have been able to give you that assignment. He's like, this is not who you are, right? This is a circumstance that you had. Now write me something, or write something that represents the truth of you, not just the circumstance, one of the circumstances that you were dealing with that contributed to like the awesomeness that you are. So I think there's how that like, I think of it as telling a different story, that reframing. So there's the story that has me feel powerless, victimized, and then there's like what's the next best version of that I can reach for, because I might not be able to actually feel like I am completely empowered, and if I try to tell that story I might actually feel like a failure, but like I might be able to connect with, well, I'm not the person that happened to, and there are these ways in which I'm growing, and it's like moving ourselves through because our words are just representative of our thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes our thoughts and our words match, and we can feel the resonance of that, we can feel the power in that, and sometimes we're speaking something that we don't believe yet, and I think that's a tricky area, because sometimes we're speaking something that we're moving into, and sometimes we're invalidating where we are. So language is yeah, we can lie to ourselves and not move forward. And we can inspire ourselves to move forward. So language is one of our, one of our creative tools.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think two other things that come to mind quickly is like our conversation about energy and physics and all of that. I was like,
Which I super geek out on. I love that stuff.
it's like having the conversation, like looking at it in like in hindsight, you're like, oh my God, look what we're talking about. Because now I feel like we're reading about that every day. You and I talk about that almost every day. I mean, we're on this frequency
Yeah.
physics every day. And so I was like so excited to see that in the conversation. And then finally, the lessons. Well, do you want to say anything about the frequency and vibration and physics? I know you geek out on it. Did you notice anything about that when you were listening?
Um, well, I mean, I just think it's so brilliant when we can take things down to like something that is understandable. It's like everything in existence has a vibration. And like some people, you try to have a conversation with them about electromagnetism, that is not the conversation to have with somebody. But like, because she, again, when she was referencing Shakti Gawain, she was like, have you ever had a situation where you were struggling with something and then you set it aside and then the answer came to you? I would go out on a limb to say that everyone has had that experience in one way or another. And so sometimes, like talking about vibration is going to trigger people's, oh, this person's crazy. And it's actually going to trigger a defense against the conversation. But bringing it to experience, like everybody, like there's folks who are going to geek out on the like the metaphysical, and then folks who are going to like, that's going to trigger their defense. So, but having a conversation about their experience that they can relate to on a day-to-day basis, like that's going to be the thing that has them go like, oh, maybe there's something to this, so it's yeah, you got to know your audience. Like, and her as a scientist and this teenager, I love thinking about her that way. I don't even know her, but I feel like I know her.
Right.
Just the way that, again, too, so it's not just that this book offered this perspective to her, but that she attracted exactly the form that she needed to have something that was going to serve her so well make sense to her. Mm-hmm. And so like we're all, and I feel like we're all wherever we are on the spectrum of awakening, and like we're attracting to us experiences that are either, like making it real clear that things don't work, or, working things out like more and more and more. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, you did, totally. And finally, I wanted to just touch on the lessons part, because that's where we closed on lessons. And it's so interesting because what came up for me when I was rewatching was the fact that I am such, like, I don't know how not to be a facilitator. I don't know how not to kind of point out some little things, especially I'm thinking about conversations with my kids. So we'll be talking about something hard or something that's going on with them, and I'll be like, well, like something's coming from that, you're going to be learning something, and they'll be like, let's they'll just be like, really not impressed with me, and then often they'll come back like, yeah, that was one of those lessons or whatever. And so to her point, and I think sometimes people just immediately assume that lessons are punitive, that there's something, a punishment. There's like, especially I love the way she opened that, like, the way we grew up, because many of us grew up in churches or in circumstances where there was just always this warning of what was going to happen, kind of lesson wise, in a way that felt like, and so I think she took the bite out of it, and I think she she delivered it in a way that just felt like, yeah, I mean, this is what we're on the planet to do. We're like continually learning. I mean, relationships are teachers. Every experience in our life is a teacher, something we're gaining. And, in that way, in a positive, that we're taking from every experience. And I know, but the thing with me is always timing. So my poor children, they're like, not right now.
Mhm.
Okay,
Definitely.
you're a little advanced in telling me about the lesson. And I'll be like, yeah, okay. But
Mhm.
I think it's a beautiful concept and thought. So what was your thought on the lessons as
Um, so I have a probably like because of that growing up in institutions where it's like I'll teach you a lesson and like that punitive flavor. I had to recontextualize lessons for myself, and so I don't think about it so much as lessons because it pulls to mind like that there is like an entity that's like dishing out the lessons, and I think of it more like every experience has value, and like every experience, and some of our experiences, this is another way I like to think of it, is reveals my superpowers. And it's like I wouldn't know what my superpower was if I hadn't had that, like if I hadn't had a circumstance where I had to draw on that superpower, it would not have been revealed to me. um and like and I think of us as all infinitely creative beings, and we chose to come into a life experience where it seems like we're surrounded by limitations, but every limitation gives us an opportunity to experience our creative power. And so we have, ideally, um we have this like unfolding experience of our creative power. Clearly I also think about nerdy things like superheroes and stuff quite a bit.
thinking about it that way. I was just like, whoa, a light just came on. Like, whoa, that's a way to think about it.
Yeah.
I've actually never heard it put that way. And so that's well, you have some things that you say sometimes. I'm like, oh, I've never heard it put that way. Whoa, I'm gonna have to steal that one. So I think I'm gonna have to think
Is that what the like this was? You were like, oh, I'm
I was
stealing
like,
that.
whoa, I love this. This is like the snaps in the poetry lounge. It's like, this is beautiful because I mean, like that's a whole way to reframe something that we could take and make it be something that feels heavy, but that's so light. It just feels light, airy, and like, yeah, we have a chance to like tap into our superpowers.
Yeah. And it was really necessary for me, like growing up with like, I mean, some just really intense, like familial abuse and trauma patterns where it was like, why? Like you were saying, it's like, why? Like, why is this happening? And so I've been really getting myself, and it's one of those things where it's like you find the story that empowers you the most. And for some people, that the framing of it as lessons, that's what empowers them. And it's less, and that's the thing about language too. It's finding not the language that's going to apply for everybody, but the language that really resonates for you. And then that resonance, like as you share it, it will touch other people, but they'll probably change it a bit, right? Like if they're not just going to take it, they're just not going to take it on. They're going to be like, oh, that, this is how I frame it so that it's mine.
Yeah, yeah. Perfect. I love this. Thank you so much, Hilary, for joining me today to recap our conversation, my conversation with Dr. Chan.
My
I feel
pleasure.
like you and I have had such a great conversation. I might like make this two-parter because it feels like so rich. But we'll see. But I just appreciate you as a friend. I appreciate you as a sister, and I appreciate you joining me today.
Thank you. My pleasure.
All right. Smiles of gratitude, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right.